Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Super Rugby preview as we look forward to round number 10 of the competition. Unfortunately for this week we will be without a special guest. All my contacts for that were otherwise busy or not able to make it this week unfortunately, but do not fear, we have something lined up for you at least next week and beyond as well. So stay tuned for those ones coming up in the future. But for today we are flying solo, we are flying alone, just me and you. So stick around, stay tuned, sit back, relax, and let's take a look back at what happened last round and then have a look forward to round number 10, see what is going to be coming our way in Super Rugby. But of course, before we kick things off, we've got to recheck how our yellow and red cards are looking. So let's get that updated now, right there. And you can see there it says 77 yellow cards and 6 red cards. That is a monumental amount. I've gone on about it every single week, but still it continues to rise. We had more red cards this week, and of course, as always, we have just about another one per match going throughout the weekend of Super Rugby. There was a couple of games when none were pulled out at all, but of course, when you have a round full of matches, there's always going to be some that pulls out 2 or 3 as well. So more cards, more games, all based off which team can receive the least cards. But speaking about those games that have just gone on, we'll have a look back at round 9 and see who were the pick from that round. It all started off on Friday night where the Hurricanes were up against the Brumbies. Now, most people truly expected the leading Australian team to not really trouble the carryover champions too much, and really that is over the 80 minutes exactly what happened. The Brumbies were in this match for quite a good portion, but as the game wore on and as more rugby was played, the Hurricanes truly showed their class and ran away with the fixture. So many players in that team carved the game up at any given moment, and with all the superstars they've got, it seems to be the no-name guys in the Hurricanes that many didn't know before this season kicked off that are really making an impact, and we mentioned none more so than their centre pairing of Vince Aso and Nangi Lamape, who have been probably the pick of this Hurricanes backline alongside Bowden Barrett. But it was a big win for the Canes. They come back strong as the game wore on and were big winners as well, 56-21, cracking that half century against the leading Australian team, which doesn't say much the way that this competition has gone for the men over the ditch. It's been a pretty average season for Australian rugby, and as we find out for the rest of the round, things didn't get too much better. If anything, we'll say they got a hell of a lot worse. But we'll get to that in, well, right now, because the second match of the weekend following that was one that Australia expected to, well, get a little bit of joy out of it, even if it was the Waratahs versus the Kings. Most teams expect to beat the Kings, but that is something that the Waratahs were unable to do. Now, I really wanted to get the Scottish Cannon back on this week after being on last week's preview where he was talking quite openly about how good the Waratahs were going to be against the Kings. Now, I heard your calls in the comments on Twitter that you wanted the Scottish Cannon back to answer all the critics of the Waratahs and really be questioned as to why they performed so poorly. Unfortunately, due to my best efforts, he was unwilling and unable to come back on this week, but don't worry, we'll get him on later on in the competition, and the questions will remain the same. No matter what happens, you cannot take away that the fact of the Kings defeated the Waratahs. And it wasn't the high-scoring thriller that many of us were expecting either. The Kings, they did a bit of a ground out to win this one, really. The Waratahs shot themselves in the foot so many times. They tried to come back late, but the Kings, well, how often do we get to say this? The Kings were just too good on the day. Final score there, 26-24. Kings over Waratahs. You know what that tells me? Sansa, sit on that. That was a big ups there from the Kings, telling Sansa where to get off, because that was a monumental display from the Southern Kings. Now, I'm happy as nuts for those guys. Deserved, so much so. They played a good game, and the Waratahs fully deserve to lose that one. They are playing terrible rugby at the moment. They went down by just 2, but they did score very, very late on. The Kings had it wrapped up with quite a few minutes to go. They let in a soft one at the end, but the Kings well and truly had that one in the bag with a few minutes left on the clock. 26-24. Could we talk about that one any more? I would love to. And it is something we will definitely revisit with the Waratahs fan himself, the Scottish Cannon. Now, third game of the weekend, we were over to South Africa where the Lions were in action up against the Hulkdual. Now, this is a match I expected the Hulkdual to struggle in because they weren't a team that was too happy being on the road. And the Lions playing the form they were, destroying the previously unbeaten Stormers. I thought this could be an easy trick-in for the home team, the Lions, but that is not really what transpired at all there. The Jaguars very much in this game, and it was a game where both sides had definite turns and chances to put the other one away, but just when they had that opportunity, the other would turn the game on its head and storm back into the game, back into the lead, and take it away from the other. It was one of those games where no matter what stage of the game it was, you never really knew who was really going to win this one. Credit goes out, as I'll mention again later on, to the Hulkdual. They didn't get a yellow card, and that is massive for them, although they didn't play that full 80 minutes. But again, something we'll cover later on. It was a close one. It was a really, really close one, and it took a late penalty for the Lions to get over the line 24-21 over the Hulkdual. Now, that is a massive result, and I think the Argentinian franchise will be a bit disappointed they couldn't pull that one off. How good of a coup would have that been if they could have beaten the Lions? I've got to say, and I'll say it again later as well, one of the best performing the best performing South African team at the moment. No question about it. The Stormers are up there, but they've really fallen away over the last couple of weeks, which is a bit of a shame, but the Lions leading the way, and they know how to win again, just getting it over the Hulkdual 24-21. Now, we were back in New Zealand Saturday night. The Highlanders were up against the Sunwolves, another team that I mentioned last week don't like to travel, and we've seen that yet again. They got thrashed by the Crusaders last weekend, and again, this one, they got thoroughly dealt to by the Hurricanes. Now, this wasn't even close, wasn't even a contest. The Highlanders dominated throughout. They controlled this game pretty easily, and the Sunwolves didn't really have much to offer. They had good portions of the game where they come into it, but ultimately the Highlanders far too good, and they were starting to show that class that a good team needs, where they can just put a weaker team away. And that's what the Highlanders did at home. Amazingly, Southland had good weather for once, and it was a good match, a decent match, and something where they could actually play some running rugby in this southern part of the world. So it was the Highlanders 40, Sunwolves 15. A bit of a thrashing there for the Sunwolves. They will be so desperate to get back home after these last few results. Now, speaking of thrashings, we made our way out to Canterbury, just up the road a good 8 or so hours, where the Crusaders were up against the Stormers, the until the week before unbeaten team, until they met the Lions, of course. Now the Crusaders, well, they well and truly put them to the Crusaders' sword as well, dashing any hope that they could get back on the winning road. The Stormers were never really in that game. Scoreline suggests they possibly were at some stage, but they never were in with a chance. The Crusaders dealt with them quickly, swiftly, and thoroughly throughout the whole 80 minutes. They didn't let the Stormers in with 24 points of their own, but when you put half a century on the other team, doesn't matter what they score, it still looks pretty bad to concede over 50 points. The Stormers didn't look like anywhere near their best, and the Crusaders, like I said, well and truly put them away 57-24. That is over a 30-point margin. It looks okay for the Stormers getting 20 points, but their defence was nothing. Paper thin by the Stormers. A big win there for the Crusaders, who continue on being undefeated. They go on yet another week. Then we made our way over to Australia, where the Western Force were in action. They were against the Chiefs. Now, this is really that bogey banana skin game that we talk about quite a bit, with the Force catching teams as they go back to South Africa. They return from South Africa. They're coming and going on big road trips. All they want to do is go home, but they've got to stop off and play the Force. This is really where the Force are like that trap. They can snare sides that aren't expecting them to pull out one of those passionate displays. It was a great atmosphere, and really have to commend the local folk out there for getting into that game and supporting their team. Maybe a little bit too late, but still, it's great to see the Force with a packed house. And you've got to say, they've got the best sort of stadium fan base name there at the Force Field. I think that is just brilliantly double meaning of the word there. And it's great to see that stadium getting nice and full and a lot of support behind that team, regardless of how they're playing, which is how it should be. The Chiefs, though, they were made to work. Back to the rugby. It was a tight match-up, but in the end, the Chiefs continue to prove, like the Crusaders, that they know how to win. And that is the main thing, and that is what gets you points. And really, the Chiefs, they did what they had to do, and it wasn't really anything special. The Force were always in that game. There was always that little slither of thought that they could upset the Chiefs, like they've done before to teams like the Crusaders as well on the way back from their road trip. In the end, the Force only managed to one converted try, and the Chiefs, to be fair, didn't manage much more than that themselves. 16-7, the Chiefs will return home now with that win in the bank, but it was really tough to come away with it. The Force are showing that they are no pushovers and that they still do deserve to be in the competition, as I've talked about many times before, as do the Kings, as do the Cheetahs, as do the Force and the Rebels, who we'll get to in just a tick. But first, we've got to go back to South Africa, where the Bulls are up against the Cheetahs. Now, another team we just talked about, the Cheetahs, not deserving to be getting the chop whatsoever here, but this game was another disappointing finish for the Cheetahs, a team that has a potential. We've seen them against the Chiefs, now we've seen them against the Bulls, leading the game for the most part. Even the Bulls, a weaker South African side, this loss will really hurt the Cheetahs. They should have put this one away, they should have won it, and to be fair, they should have beaten the Chiefs as well. The Bulls come back late, and they come back and stole it, and managed to shut out the Cheetahs, much like what happened the round before, when the Cheetahs really should have continued on, built their lead, continued punishing the other side, but they just shut off. They just go to sleep and they just completely lose the plot. That's what happened again. Now that's the second round in a row that the Cheetahs have thrown away a winnable position. Sure, you'd probably forgive them against the Chiefs or the Crusaders or the Lions sort of thing, but do you really forgive them for doing that against the Bulls, who managed to wiggle their way back in? Jesse Creel, the man getting credited for the heroics at the death there. They were always in a chance there, only trailing by 6 at the end, and that is eventually what they trailed by come full time. 20 points to 14. Tough loss for the Cheetahs, one they really would have expected to win as well. They do pick up the bonus point, but that will be of little consolation to the Cheetahs. Right, brace yourself here. I woke up Sunday morning, and as always, as you do, if you don't stay up because some of us have to work, I know, why can't I get a real job working in sport, working in rugby, commentary, media? Come on, give me a chance. But anyway, I wake up Sunday morning, off to my normal job that a normal person would do, and I take a check of the results, and I see Sharks Rebels 9-9. 9-9, I think, oh yeah, what is it, 20 minutes in, full time. Full time? What the hell went on there? Some extensive looking back at this game has occurred. And boy oh boy, we have had one missing match on our hands here, with neither side able to score a try. That's how bad that was. It was mistake ridden, there was lots of chances disallowed, not given, and of course, we had our good friend Mr. Card coming out thick and fast with Rebels captain Nick Starzacker sent for a big dirty red as well in this matchup. But still, you've got to look at the positives here, and I think for the Rebels, there is a lot of positives. In South Africa, away obviously, road trip, drawing with the Sharks. Now, one thing stands out for me here, that is that the Rebels must have learned how to tackle, because their defence must have been immaculate to stand up against not the best attacking team, the Sharks, but a team that still has that capability to score tries. And the Rebels, you know, a team that probably would consider themselves more attacking than the Sharks, they couldn't breach that great Sharks defence that we've seen over the last few years. 9-9, a stalemate, penalties only. Unbelievable between these two sides. I expected the Sharks to pull away very easily with that one, but it doesn't make very good for anyone's SuperBru picks to wake up and see a draw. Of all things, a draw. So it was a really bizarre result. I think it's the first draw of the 2017 season as well, which is, you know, groundbreaking. First one we've seen. Who picked it? I bet you no one picked that. I'm amazed. Actually, someone, or a couple of people actually in our group, managed to pick the Kings over the Waratahs, which I was almost on your side. I was that far away, but didn't quite manage it. So we're speaking about SuperBru already. Of course, following that 9-9 draw, who would have picked it? And let's have a look at the results and see who managed to pick up that shiny yellow cap for round 9. Okay, and once again we take a look at the Predictor Leaderboard, and we can see there is once again no change to our top 2, which is, wow, just bizarre that these guys, especially Caleb42N, who is just sticking it out at the top, he has over a 1-point lead over second, who is just a slither, 0.16 over third. So there is a bit of a gap there between 1 and 2. Caleb needs to have a bad round if he's going to slip away here. He needs to keep on top of things. 1.5 almost ahead. That is quickly going to disappear if he has one bad pick. So Caleb leads away, Axel in second, and now Waggers returns. He's into third, coming from that obscurity. Up and down those sides go. The Stig's still in the mix. 3 Crowns 1. Nate has had a big drop as well. Devon has gone from third to fourth, I should say. And there's a lot of movement in those top 10 positions as well. 1 and 2 up. Someone has a bad week. Don't worry, there's plenty chasing that spot. We move our way down. We can see the Driving Maul is storming up the leaderboard, up another position. He's up to 12th and almost steering his way into that top 10. It was a bad week for picks for everyone else though. A few difficult matches to come out with the Rebels and the Sharks that we've talked about. Other ones like the Kings, no one really saw that one coming either. And some of those 50-50s that really could have been a lot different with the margins as well. Who picked the force get so close to the Chiefs as well. The Scottish Cannon down 3 spots to 22nd. So he's still teetering around that 20 mark. Then we have the Reviewer. Now here's one man who made some great picks over the weekend. He has stormed up 7 spots. He had a near perfect weekend as well, picking all the tough ones, but not that final match. No one would have picked a draw there. And then we have B. Nichols, who is down there with the wooden spoon, down 5 spots. And of course my side, my picks there, down to 29th. I've dropped down 3 spots as well. Tough week. A tough week of picks, 2 weeks in a row as well to get it in. Brett Hartley though, another man we've had on the channel here, he moves up 1. So he's making his way back up the leaderboard, sitting in 35th. How about the fantasy teams? How's your team going? Let me know in the comments, of course, as always. Let's take a look at the leaderboard. So much like the Predictor, it is the same 2 sides who are leading the way in the fantasy team as well. The awesome transgender sloths, as we talk about every week, great name for a team, still sit first. They have 1,679 points and they lead out the Solar Eclipses by a standard margin of about 18 points, which is not much in fantasy teams, but these 2 sides must be pretty similar as they completely keep up with each other all the way through, because it's a long way down to Dicks Out. What a well-named team. Dicks Out is up 1 from 4th to 3rd, and we have Rapini Butha, who moved down 1 to 4th. Ben Nichols has picked up the yellow cap. I'm pretty sure it was him that picked up the wooden spoon on Predictor. So at least one of his sides or his picks are doing well. Further down, Dream Team 15 is down a spot to 6th. Big movers coming through here. Can't see anything of massive changes throughout through the teams. The All Flanks, of course, my side, they're sitting in 21st. Bad week for these guys, dropping down 4 spots. We have Scottish Cannons team up 1. So he's had a good return. Hopefully he's actually made some changes to his side in these coming weeks. Further down, we've got some big movers down here. Biggest Crusaders fan ever is actually moving up the leaderboard now, up 5, one of the big movers of the weekend. And of course down the bottom, Kev45's Mary Dragonflies picks up the wooden spoon at the bottom. But interesting weeks ahead. Someone's got to do something to catch those 2 guys at the top in their respective divisions. Is it you? Get onto it. Make sure that they don't get away. Alrighty, so all that stuff is done and dusted. We've had a look back at round 9 and we've had a look at how the picks and fantasy team leaderboards are going. Now it's into the real material of the episode. It is the predictions for round number 10. Of course, we have a couple of teams, only 2 out for the bye this weekend, and they are going to be the Bulls and the Hurricanes, who will not be featured in round number 10. 2 sides who will probably be pretty happy to go to the bye as well after the way they've been playing, especially the Bulls, to get that big win over the Cheetahs. But it all kicks off with the Highlanders up against the Stormers. Now this one could be pretty interesting here. The Highlanders, of course, been going well, coming back, playing the Sunwolves, getting a good win against them as well, whereas the Stormers, their tour has started off in a bitter way, going down, obviously leaving, going down to the Lions, first loss of the season, then getting smashed by the Crusaders. It has been a downward spiral for the Stormers. But that match for the Highlanders was much of what they really needed. They got it easy versus the Sunwolves. They don't like touring, and they got to get a nice welcome back for Waisaki Naholo, who put in a good shift of about 40 minutes. I think he went off around half time, and he looked good to come back as well. Very much sparked into action, really creates those chances out of nothing. Unfortunately, they're still waiting for Lima Sopawanga to return. Word around this week is that he's still another week away from returning to the starting team. But the Highlanders still don't look like that complete side. They're still looking a little bit short of where they're going to need to be if they're going to compete in the postseason of Super Rugby. And also, being the first match of the round, we have a bit of more indication about who's going to be playing. More coming out of this about this team, that they're going to be losing Wylock and Dixon for the match against the Stormers. That is going to severely hamper their back row, which is normally quite good. Of course, they've still got a couple of key men there already, but the depth in their position is normally really good for the Highlanders. They're missing a lot of players through injury already, and that could be a bit of a decisive factor if the Stormers really want to pinpoint an area to attack these Highlanders. Now, as for their opponent, the Stormers, they've hit the road hard. That loss when they left South Africa, then they hit the Crew, and the Crusaders definitely took no prisoners. No remorse whatsoever from the Canterbury franchise. They showed little glimpses, as we talked about. They scored some points, got 24 on the board, which is no mean feat, but they look completely out of their league. They look completely lost on tour, and they need to perform better because they need to take points back to Africa. If they don't come here and pick up at least a win, they could really go from being a front runner from Africa to a has-been from Africa. Because when you look at the table, they've got a good lead over the Bulls, and when you look at their pool as well, Bulls, Cheetahs and Sunwolves, you know, something's really going to have to change for either the Bulls or the Cheetahs if anyone's going to even catch the Stormers already with that 12-point lead. But the Bulls are showing they know how to win. They're back in Africa as well, which always makes that big part of difference. The Cheetahs, jury is still massively out about the Cheetahs, whether they're actually going to be good enough to perform. They needed to beat the Bulls and take hold of that second position in Africa 1 if they're really going to be contenders this season. Really, the Stormers, they just need to keep rolling. Take up points here and there. Make sure they get back to South Africa with points from their tour like we just talked about, and then continue to just take wins at home. Pick off the weaker teams when they come up against them, and make sure that they beat the Bulls, they beat the Cheetahs, and they beat the Sunwolves. That is the most important thing for the Stormers, that they top this pool. It's going to be hard for them though against the Highlanders. A very good side, play like a team more than they do like individuals. So you can expect that no matter who pulls on that Highlanders jumper, they're going to be decent. Like we talked about, they've still got the Smiths, they've still got the Naholos coming back, still Fikatoa, great form. Matt Faddis, probably player of the round in round 9. He's back on the bench as well, with Rob Thompson returning back into the centres. I mean, there's plenty of talent in this Highlanders team at home as well. Makes a huge difference for them, and I'm going to be going with the Highlanders to win this one by 9. So that's a good win. Start off the weekend for the Highlanders over the touring Stormers. Second match of the weekend is the Chiefs up against the Sunwolves. And really, I feel sorry for the Sunwolves a bit here because they have to tour New Zealand, which is difficult enough as it is. But you look at the prospect of who they could have possibly come up against. Who is weak in New Zealand? Who could you say, yeah, we've pulled out the worst team in New Zealand? It's like, you know, when you tour to South Africa, you want to pick out the kings. When you tour to Australia, it doesn't matter because they're all rubbish. But you want to pick out those weakest sides that you can from your tour. The Sunwolves, they've pulled a short straw here, and I think they'll be happy to be joining Australia next season if that all goes ahead as proposed, because they'll be probably, enjoying the prospect of being able to win some matches should the opportunity arise in Australia, which they definitely would be good enough to do that. So the Chiefs, though, they are back in the country, which is always a great thing for them to come back home. And that'll lift their performance no end as well, being back in their home stadium. But they've looked pretty unconvincing, and a lot of people have talked to or read things about over the last few weeks as well, is that the Chiefs look very unconvincing. They don't look like a team who's going to put away a good side and differently to a bad side. They seem to be struggling to find the performances, to find the tries. But the main thing that matters here is that they're still winning. And don't forget here that the Chiefs have still only lost one game. One game all season. That is all the Chiefs have lost. So you can't forget that. And they are coming up against the Sunwolves. They did what they had to do against the Force. Yes, they looked unconvincing against the Cheetahs as well. But I think now they're back home, back from their tour. They picked up a lot of points as well, which is going to be just great because now they can come back, positive vibes around the team. They're sitting up nicely on the table as well, right in the middle. Equal points with the Hurricanes, of course. Both teams on 7 wins, 1 loss, just trailing behind the Crusaders, who have picked up less bonus points. Only 3 points of difference, so as soon as the Crusaders drop one, if they do, those two sides are both ready to pounce, and that is where the Chiefs need to be. And of course, when you're keeping up with an undefeated side on points, you know you're going to be there or thereabouts come those wildcard spots at the end of the season that will be handed out to the sides. And like I said, they know how to win, they know how to pull it out of the bag, and they just do enough. But you've got to be positive. The players like McKenzie are starting to actually come into form, starting to show some glimpses of what they could do last year as well, and they are going to continue to be dangerous. As for the Sunwolves, they hate the road. They hate the road completely. They looked terrible against the Crusaders a couple of weeks ago, and they looked equally as bad against the Highlanders. Although I must say, looking at their performances and how they played, they are playing better. Their forward pack is playing better, but where they were really good at home was their backline and creating that exposed outside channel passages where they could make line breaks, where they could make some inroads into defence. They seem to have lost that on tour, and if anything, it's their back row especially that is really coming into their own. I mean, we're talking seasoned professionals here, the likes of really Brits, especially Sam Wykes, and players like them who are stepping up, who know how to travel, who know how to tour, and who know how to perform consistently at a high level. They need to drag the rest of that team up, and they need to really lift the whole side to perform to that level, because I'm impressed by those guys, their pack especially, in that game against the Highlanders. What was disappointing was how they used the ball they had. They dropped a lot, pointless kicking, a lot of charge down kicks. Nothing really went their way at all for the Sunwolves, and they need to really change up everything completely if they're going to get back on that chance of scoring enough points to be in the match to actually win or have a chance of winning. If they don't score tries, they're not going to get that far in Super Rugby. Their performances at home are positive, and it's good to see them improving, but I think the road travel is still going to be some time away of getting to a high standard for the Sunwolves, and as that goes, I'm going to be going for the Chiefs by 33 over the Sunwolves. Okay, moving on, third game of the weekend, and isn't this just a doozy of rubbish? A doozy of rubbish. Reds versus the Waratahs. Now I am concerned to watch this game, because this is two of the worst performing sides in Super Rugby. Now the Kings, we know they're not that great, but at least they've got excitement on the outside. I don't know what these two teams really represent anymore. 4 wins, that's just 4 wins between both the two sides. That is it. That is it, amazingly. It's like the bottom side in New Zealand, that is the Blues, has 3 wins by themselves. And they're bottom. These guys are 2 teams sitting mid-table in Australia, 2nd and 4th. Can you believe this? After the Waratahs lost to the Kings would have been 2nd in Australia. 10 points, they would have been equal with the Reds, but they have better points differential. That is just crazy. That is crazy talk, You can say how crap the Kings are, but they're playing tougher opposition, and they're on tour. What is going on here with Australia? I don't know what to expect from these two sides. Where do you look for the positives here? I can't find any positives from the Reds or the Waratahs. What was good out of that match against the Kings from the Waratahs? Nothing. They look completely just lost. Absolutely no way they knew what they were doing there at all. Foley is like a beacon all by himself, but he's just one man. They just have no continuity. They're broken. And like, this is why I wanted to get the Cannon back on this week, because what is going on with his team? Is it the coach? Gibson has been really flying under the radar as, you know, as quickly as coaches normally get pinged here for the faults. He has just been sliding along. No one's been looking at old Daryl. They've been avoiding him. And surely the spotlight has to come on him sooner or later if these performances keep up, because it is not good enough from a team that possesses so much Australian talent. Amazingly, I'm going to be going for the Reds in this one, because the Reds, I think, looked a bit better with Craig Cooper. As much as I'm not the biggest fan of his, think he's probably a bit past his prime. He's a great ball runner. He's a great creator. He still has that little spark, which is probably more than any other Australian fly half can create, bar Bernard Foley at the moment. That matchup could be quite spectacular. That is probably something that was worth watching this game by, to see how that Foley versus Cooper battle goes. Other than that, will they score a try? Will they manage to hold on to the ball long enough to put together 6 phases? May seem a bit harsh, but these two sides have been very, very poor. Everyone rubbishes the Kings, but you put them over comparatively. They're in a pool with the Lions, the Sharks, and the Jaguars. And those 3 sides are better than any team in Australia right now. And they have more points to get second. Logic, people. Logic tells you Australia is in a very, very bad place right now. And all I've got to say about this one is I've got the Reds by 7. And I think it's going to be something like 18-11. It's going to be a horrid match. And I can't see either of these two sides really getting in to dominate. Something's got to change with Australian rugby. I'm going Reds by 7 and moving on to the next match, which is more Australian teams, but it's the Force versus the Lions. Now, we talked about it before, about the Force being that trap where they can catch teams coming in to their tour of Australia, moving out back to Africa or New Zealand, of course, from Africa. Now, we know what the Force can do, and we know now the support is fully with this team. It's like that extra man, that 16th man on the field is going to be crucial for the Force. It's that trap, they're packed stadiums, and they are a threat. They are a real banana skin threat to teams travelling through. It's only the beginning, though, of the Lions tour, which could count against the Force being able to make something, really happen in this matchup. The Lions will be fresh still. They'll be on their first game of the tour. They'll be desperate to come away with some points on tour, and it starts with the Force, and I do think that the Lions will be far, far too good. They are the form team in Africa, and I think they'll be a bit hurting as well about that result against the Jaguars, where they only just snuck away with the win against the Argentinian side. The tour will ask the questions we really want to know about the Lions. We talk about them being the top performing side from Africa, but can they travel? We've seen last year, Super Rugby final, they couldn't travel. They should have done everything within their power to get that home final back at their stadium. Now they have to ask those same questions again. Do they have that same opportunity to ask those questions? But we need to know how this team's going to perform on tour, and they need to put the Force away. You can expect plenty of passion, you can expect plenty of excitement and determination out of this Force team as they look to pressure and look to just do everything they can to upset anyone else and make themselves look good, because they are desperate to look good. They have to look good. And a win against anyone, be it the Kings, be it the Waratahs, be it the Reds, be it whoever, it doesn't matter. The Force will be desperate to pull a win from every visitor to their stadium. and that is what they will be desperately keen to do. I don't think they're going to be good enough. I think the Lions are going to come over here. If the Lions were facing the Force on their way back to Africa, I would probably turn this result around based on how they performed, but I still think that is that slippery slope when you're on your way home and you just got that one game left. Oh, does it really matter if we drop one? We've already picked up 6 points on tour. That is when the Force pounce. I don't think they're going to do it here. It is first match of the tour for the Lions, and they'll pull this one away quite easily, I think. 27 points over the Western Force, but it's going to be interesting to see how the Lions travel to Australia on tour. They've looked so good already. Can they carry on? Now we go back to where the Lions left. It's back to South Africa, where the Cheetahs are up against another team we really want to see how they're going to tour, and that is the Crusaders. Now, this is where we're going to determine whether the Crusaders can go undefeated throughout this season. The Cheetahs, they can't play in 80 minutes at the moment. 2 really good chances to score massive points. If they got 2 wins, they would have been on 18 points or so, and they would have really been pressuring the Stormers atop that African One conference. But as a result comes out, they lost both of those games, and they will be just devastated that they couldn't put those results away. The Cheetahs, they need to find something to get them wins. They need to find that last half an hour that puts them into matches. They led the Bulls for most of that game, yet just like the Chiefs, they fell away at the end. That's what they've got to be targeting. That's what they've got to look for. They've got to get into the match and stay there. They're good enough to make it. Not many teams can go up 24-0 against the Chiefs. That is no mean feat. Doesn't matter where you play, that is tough. They need to clean up their game. Get rid of the errors, get rid of the mistakes, stop allowing their opposition to storm back in is the big thing for the Cheetahs. They relied a lot on the kicking in the last game as well, which is almost surprising. A team that can score tries so willingly, reverting back to that goal-kicking desperation for points. They can't do that against the Crusaders. They cannot do that against the Crusaders whatsoever, because we know the Crusaders still undefeated. They're on tour, and this is where we're going to learn whether the Crusaders are going to be good enough to really push this undefeated streak towards the gritty end of the season. I don't think we're going to find out too much though about the Crusaders, because they do have a fairly easy tour list of matches as well. I fully expect them to get over the Cheetahs here, and they'll continue on their tour, and I fully expect them to come back to New Zealand with wins all in the bag and still undefeated. They just look too good, and it's a team that really dominates as the game wears on, the Crusaders, versus a team that dominates for a start and fades away in the Cheetahs. Too contrasting. Expect the Cheetahs to start strong, and then you'll get the contrasting fade of the Crusaders going up, the Cheetahs falling flat on their face, and it will be game over. Around the 60 to 70 minute mark is when you can fully expect the Crusaders to shut that one out, if they haven't done it already. If the Cheetahs don't turn up at the start, it could be a very, very long day at the office for the home team, who just haven't found their full performance yet. I think that loss against the Bulls would have really hurt the Cheetahs. That is one they would have targeted, going on how the Bulls have been playing as well. They lost to the Sunwolves, which really would have hurt them too. So it'll be 2 teams now really hurting in that same pool, and they will be desperate to finish above the other as well. There is still a lot of water to go under that South African bridge, with those sides wanting to put things right if they are the team to get the chop. I've got the Crusaders coming out on top of this one by 22 points. Big win for the Crusaders. Cheetahs to fade away late and probably blow the scoreline out more than it really would deserve to be. But the Crusaders will carry on being undefeated for their 9th game in a row. And while we're over there in South Africa as well, we keep things going with the Kings up against the Rebels. Now, of course, the Rebels with that draw against the Sharks, and that was an away match as well. Sharks at home. We remember the Kings beating the Waratahs, and that was in Australia as well. So 2 teams, both coming back from on the road. The Rebels going to the Kings' home now, and they will be buoyant after that brilliant win against the Waratahs, and they will be on top of the world after sending the signal to everyone involved in Sanzar, telling them that they have deserved their spot in Super Rugby. And what an improvement as well. Who would have said at the start of the season, if the Kings are going to win a game, who would it be against? You would have said the Force, possibly. You probably would have said maybe the Cheetahs, Sunwolves, the Jaguars even, the sides that they're probably going or could beat. Who would have said the Waratahs? No one really would have said the Waratahs unless you're extremely cynical against the Waratahs. That is the thing. That is great for the Kings. I think they were the team of the week as well. The way they played and applied themselves, a team not used to winning, able to come out and grind that win. Now the Kings are a team that normally just keep playing the same way. They keep attacking, keep attacking, keep attacking. Don't worry about conceding, just keep attacking. That is their main ploy, and that is what they go with. I sensed a little bit of a change in that game against the Waratahs, where they actually started to grind the win out. They started to play a bit of defence, they started to play a bit of the clock, and they started to get that little hope in their eye that they could actually do this. And they did it as well. Self-confidence is a huge thing, and the Kings, they may have just found it as well. If they can carry with them, it could go a long way to improving their style of rugby. If they can keep that attack, but also that knowledge of how to win and producing a performance that they can get backed up on as well. I think their forwards actually performed quite well, and a team that's normally their outside backs that do the real damage, and their forwards just try and stay in the game. I thought they actually had an all-round performance here against the Waratahs. Still not great, sure, both teams were dreadful, but the Kings actually matched it, and they used their strengths, which of course are their outside backs, their try-scoring, freakish, breaking game, X-Factor players, to put that one away, and I've got to credit them. I really enjoyed the Kings the week before, where they scored a lot of points. They looked quite dangerous against the Force, I think that was, and I really enjoyed that game against the Waratahs, where they actually showed a bit of rugby nous, and they actually got it down there and sorted out what they need to do, which was great to see from the Kings, showing that they are developing as a side. Now their opponents though, the Rebels, 9-all draw. What do you take from that? They couldn't score a try, but they defended very, very well, which is interesting because the Kings love to attack. This one could be quite an interesting matchup between the two sides. They did the same almost to what the Kings did to the Waratahs, the Rebels did to the Sharks. They kind of played their own game against them. The Sharks are a very defensive side. The Rebels come at them with that same game plan. Is a draw a good result for the Rebels? I think yes. Any points they can pick up and not have an L next to them is great points. So the Rebels, they'll be more than happy, even if they lose every match by 50 points from here on in, to come away with some points, and a match that's not a loss is a success for the Rebels. Isn't it bizarre though, when a team gets hammered by the Cards, it does motivate them. It was their captain, of course, we spoke of earlier, Nick Sturzaker, picking up a yellow and then a red, of course, later on. And they also picked up another yellow later on as well. That kind of, you would expect that to really smash them down. And almost in a 9-9 game with 14 men, they managed to pull off that win. Is remarkable, is well played, and is well deserved. And who knows what this game can deliver. It could be quite amazing. We know that both of these teams can attack, and they can attack brilliantly as well. They can score the greatest tries in Super Rugby, but they can be terrible. And by terrible, it's probably worse than that. They can be dreadful, shocking, woeful at the same time. So this could be an exciting, exhilarating match full of tries and running rugby, or it could be a complete mistake fest and ball fest and put you to sleep. I hope, for the sake of Super Rugby, it is the first of those two options, and we have a good classic game between those two. But I'm going with the Kings. What I should have done last week. Kings by 3 over the Rebels, home advantage. Going to prove the difference between these two sides in round 10. Right, 2 games to go. We've got the Highlanders versus the Sharks. Now, this one's a goodie, isn't it? The Sharks were grounded and pounded, like we just talked about, by the Rebels. The Jaguars, of course, back at home. And I think they'll be happy as well. They'll be annoyed, but they'll be happy. They went to the Lions, the formed team of Africa, and they almost snuck it. They almost snuck even a draw. It was all tied up with just not long to go, minutes remaining on the clock before the Lions got up for that little 3-point lead. But most importantly, more than anything for the Highlanders, they are back at home. I think if this team could rearrange their fixtures, this and just go home all the way through and then play all their away matches at the end and not really care what they've done. Momentum at home is something that they love, and they build on it brilliantly. We've seen the start of the season, they were brilliant at home, and they put it away. So to pull off an almost upset against the Lions will put them quite positive. Confidence, again, we speak about that word, but again, that little bit of extra annoyance that they couldn't get over the line could lift this team, as well as being at home. We talk about the Sunwolves as that extra man, that 16th player on the field, that support, that hostile support that the other teams find for the Jaguares. They could be great. And another good positive, I spoke about it before in the review, no cards. No cards. That is superb for the Jaguares, because they are a team that often suffer the wrath of the referee by getting ditched out those yellows and red cards all the time. That ruins their chances. They got none. They got none. The Lions actually got 1 yellow in that game as well, which was a good turn up to the cards, you could say, but they need to keep that up. But again, you got to look at something to improve on. The consistency was pretty average, and they could have easily won that game against the Lions if they were just a touch more consistent and didn't keep letting the Lions storm back in and out of that game. That is what they could work on throughout that week. Hopefully, back at home, they should be hard to stop. As for the Sharks, they would be devastated drawing with the Rebels. That would be a massive loss for them. 9-9, they should have thrashed them. They should have put them to bed. They shouldn't have even looked like conceding anything. The Sharks probably the better of the two sides throughout that game, but they couldn't put it away. 14 men as well, they couldn't put it away. That's a shock result, and if anything, that has to kick them into gear as well. They're struggling to keep up in their pool with the Lions now. The Lions are up by 8 points. That is something the Sharks need to watch, because any hope of them getting in the playoffs is probably going to result in them getting up, and at least in that second spot. They need to be right up the butt of the Lions, because they've got to watch out, because the Jaguares, the team they play here today, this weekend I should say, are just 4 points behind them. A win here for the Jaguares could see them leapfrog the Sharks, which would be crucial in the rest of the season. 24 points for the Sharks, 20 for the Jaguares. We've got to look out points differential. The Jaguares have actually scored +2 more than the Sharks. That is crucial. A win is bang, straight up to second for the Jaguares, and they could steal that wildcard spot, that playoff spot. It is a possibility that we could see the Jaguares in the knockout stage, which would be brilliant as well. I really hope that does happen, but the Sharks will be desperate to make sure it doesn't, and they really have to pick up a win here today to do so. They need to get rid of that game versus the Rebels, wipe it from their mind. They need to reevaluate, restart, and rethink what they're going to do on the road. Oh, they will be so mortified about what happened against the Rebels. A draw on the record, it's better than a loss, I guess, but a match that they would have expected and marked to win, and a really good chance to get their points differential up as well, which is going to be super important for the Sharks. I've got the Jaguares on this one. I've got them by 13 over the Sharks. I really do like the look of this Jaguares team when they are at home. On the road, I'm unconvinced. They were great against the Lions, but can they do it against everyone else is the big question. I expect them to do it here against the Sharks, who just don't look to what they were a few weeks ago. They need to bounce back. That's going to be a question on them between these two sides. Big repercussions on order here. Who is going to take that second spot in Africa too? Right, we close out the round. This is always mega. Every single Super Rugby preview is a mega. Here I was planning to do a quick one, and look what it's turned out to be. Final game, Brumbies, Blues. Now, this one, hopefully quickly. Brumbies, dreadful. Blues, not that dreadful. But still, you look at the table, Brumbies, top of Australia, 3 wins. Blues, bottom of New Zealand, 3 wins. That just tells you how weak Australian rugby is. That tells you a big problem. The bottom side in New Zealand has the same amount of wins as a top team in Australia. That is just not right. That is not right in any way you look at it. Points differential as well. There's not too much there. The Brumbies are +6. The Blues are +33. How does that happen? How does the top team in Australia, the only team in Australia, to be plus points differential? They're both on the same points. They're both on 17. this matchup makes no sense at all. You'd expect to be similar positions based on their points and where they are on the table. It makes no sense at all. The Australian teams have been nothing short of disastrous this year, and I expect the Blues to just go over there and romp them as well. There's a little hope that the Brumbies could do something. They showed a little bit of hope against the Canes as well in their last match, but I can't see any hope for them. The Blues are getting better and better. They're getting continuity. They're starting to enjoy their games. They're starting to break away. Sonny Bill's made a big difference to them coming in at inside centre. He is a game breaker, and I think he's going to enjoy a little bit of fun in this Brumbies game. I think the big thing is going to be nullifying the effect of Henry Spate. He's the only one who can really do some damage. Put pressure on Hawera. He could be the one that could really break down that back line. If you put pressure on him and it doesn't get through, that could be a game breaker for the Blues as well. Targeting two areas they need to look out for, as well as the maul. The Brumbies like to go to the maul, but like we've spoke about in previous weeks, it's really not as effective as it has been in the past. The Blues coming off the bye, good recent form, almost beat the Hurricanes, who smashed the Brumbies while they're on the bye as well. They need this win here, the Blues, I think. They need to get this win because they need to keep pace here with the likes of the Highlanders and, well, not even the Chiefs. The Chiefs are all gone. Top three sides in New Zealand have really all departed. When you look at the points board, you see the Crusaders, the Hurricanes and Chiefs on 36, 33 and 33. Then it is a bit of a battle between the Highlanders and the Blues on 23 and 17. They need to keep winning here, the Blues, because you probably pick that the Highlanders are going to pick up the victory against the Stormers. That's my pick. That'll get them at least 4 points. They'll be up to 27. They can't afford to lose here, the Blues, and go 10 points adrift. That would be bad for their season. They need to pick up this win against the Brumbies, make the Australian Conference look even worse than it is already, and continue on the onslaught up that table. The Blues looking better, but they have a long, long way to go. I'm going Blues by 18 in this one to get the win over the leading Australian Conference side. But that does wrap us up. That has wrapped us up for today's preview of round 10 of Super Rugby. Hope you all enjoyed and hope you've taken some points, got your picks in as well for this weekend's action. Of course, if anything you think is different to what I think, this is just my opinion, so leave your own, of course, in the comments below, and we can have a look and a bit of a banter about that as well. Do not forget to catch me on Twitter. You can hit me up there at Cornflakes Crib. We always have some good chat going on over the weekends of matches as well. Like to abuse the referees and the players, and always have some good fun on there. So do feel free to join us on Twitter over those matches. And of course, hopefully next week we're back to having our guests again, have a couple more lined up for the next couple of weeks as well. So stick around for those. Hope you've enjoyed today's episode, haven't fallen asleep, and have had some fun tuning in to this week's preview. Until next time, thanks for tuning in and watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Take care.